On some cool shit, but now it's back to some killer shit. Got some wild hoes that'll drill a bitch. He has no limit, 30 years, running 30 years, gunning.
Okay, so those of us who watched the fight between Adrien Broner and John Molina knows that one of the major talking points was the fact that John Molina simply didn't throw any punches. You know, he was just not active enough. And a lot of people who basically starve their brains of oxygen would go on to have all these conspiracy theories as to why Molina wasn't letting his hands go, when the answers to the reason why he wasn't punching are right there staring them in the face inside the ring. So this is, of course, a natural mental illness of people, whereby they'd rather pick a conspiracy theory outside the ring as an explanation for why Molina wasn't letting his hands go, when the answers were perfectly visible inside the ring. So with that said, let's get straight to the breakdown.
Tango and cash, hit the bank, no mask, out the freezer, cold cash, put Grammy winners in cabs, never happened twice, gotta take a chance, never end.
Okay, so the first thing we're going to take a look at is how Adrien Broner was able to utilize distance deception in this fight. Now, Broner would actually manipulate the distance between himself and John Molina by actually sneaking his lead foot closer to Molina while pulling his upper body away at the same time and thereby sitting back onto his back foot. Now, Broner is in range to punch, but he can also fade from Molina's offense.
Taking his time, Broner's taking his time, trying to figure his man out. For the course of his career.
Alright, so let's pay attention here to what Adrien Broner does. The first thing you're going to see is he shows John Molina his high guard defense. Now pay attention to his lead foot. There you see Broner actually steps his lead foot closer to John Molina, but it's important to remember, of course, that it's the lead foot that actually determines your distance from your opponent, not your head or your hands. Now, as Broner steps closer to Molina, he pulls his upper body away from John Molina and sits back onto his back foot, and this is how he distorts his distance. So we see Molina shoots his jab, but Adrien Broner simply fades away from the punch. This is one of the key reasons why Molina actually refuses to let his hands go, because he simply couldn't find his range. Now keep in mind, Adrien Broner is a counterpuncher, so when you can't find your range and there's the possibility of being countered, you tend to become gun shy. This is not the only reason though, this is just one of the reasons. Alright, let's pay attention to how Adrien Broner is going to step his lead foot forward, but he pulls his upper body back, and then he explodes off his back foot with the jab. His jabs are very crisp, very fast, just beautiful jabs from Adrien Broner, but the key is how he's manipulating his distance. He'll pull his upper body away, and then he explodes from that position with the jab, and this is very difficult for Molina to time, and he becomes very gun shy. Okay, now we're going to talk about Adrien Broner's jab. Broner utilized a very good jab in this fight with Molina. It was very fast and it was also crisp. Broner had a lot of confidence behind his jab, and Molina simply had to respect not only the speed of his jabs and the way he was able to set them up and the way he was able to use his jab to control the fight, but also the power of the jab. Notice how early Broner is able to establish his jab with John Molina.
He needs to be for Molina to do. These names. The crowd.
That's what he wants.
So here we see Broner changing the different looks that he shows Molina. Goes from a Philly shell to a high guard defense, and then he shoots his jab. Of course, this is the step jab we're just seeing here from Broner. You notice that he doesn't flare out his elbows. He doesn't telegraph the jab in any way. He doesn't drop his right glove. He remains defensively responsible. This is good execution on the step jab from Adrien Broner. And here we see how Broner again steps in with the jab. Notice that he's pushing off his back foot. Now, we're able to see Broner establish his jab from the very first round. Not only does he use it as a rangefinder to score points, to set up his offense, but he also uses it to control the distance and the pace of the fight.
He's weak. Every now and then time, he's weak. Every now and
You can really tell just how effective Adrien Broner's jab is by the way Molina is reacting to all these feints. Notice the reaction he gets from John Molina every time he feints that jab. You can just see the effect it's having. And you really just have to love the way Adrien Broner would shoot the jab to head and then he'd shoot the jab down to the body. That jab to the solar plexus, beautiful weapons that we see Adrien Broner use. The feint there we just seen him use. And the way he would change levels and he'd be very low, giving Molina different looks, and then he shows the jab upstairs and then shoots it down to the body. Eventually you begin to see that Molina is, this is just an equation that he simply can't solve, because Broner is using this jab in such a versatile way. Then you also see him leading with hooks off the jab. Look at how he's able to now begin to bring that left hook around the sides because Molina is expecting the jab. Just a beautiful execution from Adrien Broner. One of the things that impressed me about Adrien Broner's performance was the way he would consistently give John Molina different looks. In other words, the way he would change the positioning of his hands, or his defensive position, or his use of feints. The way he would change his head position, for example, or the angle of his spine. Just the way he presents himself to John Molina, this is what I consider different looks, and this is a key aspect of the sweet science.
Never. I'm impressed with them.
And this is simply one of the best examples of Broner giving different looks. In this segment, which is about 5 or 6 seconds, which I'm going to actually break down in more detail, Broner actually shows John Molina something like 7 different looks in about 5 seconds. And it's just an amazing piece of film because you see how he literally just changes the way he appears to John Molina so many times that Molina has no idea what's coming next. Alright, so let's examine all the different looks that Broner gives John Molina. So the first one we see is he's in the Philly shell defense and he has his weight on his back foot, so he's sitting down into his back foot. That's the first look that he gives John Molina. The second one is he goes into a high guard defense, but now he's leaned forward, so he's in a neutral plane, or he has a neutral spine. He steps back. Now let's take a look at the third one. You see the third look that he gives him is he goes back into the Philly shell defense and sits down on his back foot once again. That's number 3. Now number 4, you see the feint that he just gives him. You see the reaction from John Molina. Let's take a look at the 5th look that he gives him. Here you see him show his lead hand. Just another way of distracting your opponent. You see how he shows that lead hand to John Molina. Now look how beautiful how he feints to the right side of Molina's body. Now those arrows there is just to show you an indication of the different types of offense that Broner can actually have. Anything from a left hook to the body, or even a left uppercut straight down the middle. So the 7th and final look that Adrien Broner gives John Molina is basically going back into that high guard defense. 7 different looks in 5 or 6 seconds. And so of course when Broner leads with this left hook, I'm really just not surprised that John Molina is unable to react to this and actually gets hit flush, because of course Molina is not going to be able to cope with a guy like Adrien Broner. You have to look at those things I just showed you with the way he was showing him different looks, and you realize instantly this fight was a complete mismatch. The skill level was much too wide, and Molina simply had no chance to really adjust to this because he's never seen anything like Adrien Broner.
I'm impressed with.
Alright, so now let's take a look at how Broner was able to smother John Molina and then utilize control on the inside in order to set up his offense. So Broner showcased just about every skill in his repertoire in this fight with John Molina, and in this case we're going to take a look at how he's able to smother him like I just said previously, and then utilize that forearm on the inside for control and for creating space to work on the inside.
Alright, thank you. Marv. Alright, Mike Stafford also out of.
But first we have to talk about how Broner uses that lead hand just to keep Molina off balance and at a distance, then he steps in and closes the distance. Now, of course, we see Broner smothering Molina. We know that Molina needs distance to land his big right hand. Broner takes away that distance. Notice how Broner also forces that left forearm between himself and John Molina. This creates the space for Broner to work on the inside. And then we see Broner land this right hand on the inside and then just ride with the overhand right from John Molina.
So far, Molina has not been listening to his corner.
Get off to one side or the other.
So far, Molina has not been listening to his corner.
Alright, so one thing we all know, those of us who watched this fight, is that Molina was basically one-handed. I mean, all he had was this right hand, this overhand right that he wanted to throw. And have you ever seen a punch more telegraphed in your life? I mean, Adrien Broner could see this thing country miles away, because Molina would always drop his head when he throws his right hand. He would always telegraph the punch in just the most obvious way, to the point where Broner could really just watch for that one overhand right that he would throw every 5 minutes and then just avoid it so easily, to the point where it really became kind of cartoonish and almost comical just how John Molina actually did in this fight. So like I said previously, Adrien Broner had so many skills to showcase in this fight due to the type of opposition he had. And one of these tricks is actually the ability to establish a predictable rhythm with your opponent, typically done with the lead hand, and then you spontaneously break that predictable rhythm as you launch into some offense. And Guillermo Rigondeaux does this all the time. You establish a predictable sequence of events, and then you break that sequence.
That's a right hand right there. That's a right hand right there.
Okay, let's watch how this predictable rhythm has been established. You see him show the lead hand once. He's going to show the lead hand a second time. Watch how he keeps the same tempo. He shows the lead hand a third time. He's going to show it to him a fourth time. He's speeding up the tempo a little bit there, and then you see him just pop the jab. So just a quick change of tempo, spontaneously breaking that rhythm. Once again, I mean, you're literally watching a man by the name of John Molina who has been lulled into a trance. This man is literally being hypnotized. Watch the way he takes this jab that's coming up now. Watch the way his head just snaps back. Have you ever seen anything like this? This guy was hypnotized. Okay, and I'm not just saying that. I'm not trying to make fun of anybody. This guy was literally in a trance.
That's a right hand right there. Not too much is going to happen here, but from Molina's standpoint, being the most inexperienced, he needs to be more aggressive, a little bit more. He needs to be more aggressive, a little bit more.
So within the first 30 seconds of the fight, you have the legend himself, Ray Leonard, telling us all the obvious game plan that Molina should have used, which is to be more aggressive against a guy like Adrien Broner. To think that Molina actually stood in the center of the ring and tried to outbox this guy. I mean, this really happened, this actually happened. He stood in the middle of the ring. This went out to 3.1 million people. They saw Molina try to outbox Adrien Broner, and it just didn't happen. So, I mean, look, Adrien Broner is a guy. You could literally tie one of his hands behind his back, and you could even blindfold this guy. With eyes closed and with one hand, he would outbox John Molina for 12 rounds. Easy. So Molina had no choice but to be more aggressive. The only chance he stood in this fight was if he basically approached Broner the way El Chino Maidana approached the Floyd Mayweather fight. That's what he should have done. But, we saw what he did. And to then blame Broner for boxing him and, using his skills and say he was running, that's just disgraceful. That's just excuses from a guy who is totally one-dimensional.
I want to see what happens there. It's wide open.
Okay, so this is a perfect example of Broner fading away from Molina's offense. See how he just sits back on his back foot to avoid the jab. Then watch him change levels, gets low, shows a different look, and then watch him jab to the body. And see, this is just how he confuses Molina, and then you're going to see him leap off with that left hook to the side. So what I'm trying to say is the way he sits back onto that back foot allows him to fade from Molina, so Molina is never in range to punch because he refuses to double up on his jab.
It's wide open.
Okay, so having said all this, let's talk about some of the things that John Molina should have done. The first thing is he should have set up most of his offense behind the jab. He was relying on that right hand way too much. Now you're probably thinking, how could he set up his offense behind the jab when he couldn't find his range? Well, this leads me to the second point. He should have doubled or even tripled up on his jab. But you should step in behind the first jab. That's what he wasn't doing. If he steps in behind the first jab and he doubles and triples up the jab, he will be in range to catch Adrien Broner with something. And this is the point. When you're now in range, just change the angle of that right hand. Throw looping right hands, straight right hands, overhand rights. Broner was able to deal with the same punch over and over again because Molina was throwing the exact same thing.
By unanimous decision from Cincinnati, Ohio, Adrien the Problem Broner.
While we was fighting, I was talking to him. Every shot he missed, I was like, oh, really? Try that again.
Please make sure you click the red button to subscribe to my channel if you already haven't. Then check out some of my previous videos, or you could check out one of my more popular videos right now. Or you could do absolutely nothing and go out to the outro music.
G's up, yeah, man. Bent white, yeah, man. China white.